settle in, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. I was reading his bio. You can all read it online. He's going to be talking about crowdlending, which I had not heard of before, so I'm really anxious to hear more. And the thing that in his bio that I just wanted to comment on was, the community doing the work for the community, funding and raising money for the community. So I think that's a really important topic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. So it's my pleasure to introduce Blake Bunting. He's the founder and director of business development of Goparity. He's going to talk to us today about crowdlending as a catalyst for change. So please welcome Blake. You're welcome.
Hello, hello. Just before I get started today, I wanted to say two things. One, I think this might be the best backdrop I've ever seen on a stage I'm on. And the second is I want to shout out my mom's here. She flew out to see this, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm also excited because the last time I was at Energy Disruptors on stage, I was 22 years old. That made me the youngest speaker at the event that year. I came speaking of the importance of young people's voices within the energy transition and introduced a collaborative financing model called crowdlending and how it can be a catalyst for more sustainable development projects being funded around the globe. I came speaking about the necessity for intergenerational collaboration and the importance it plays in decision-making and moving our world forward. Today, I come back to you all grown up, because it's my birthday. I'm 25 years old. And that means my prefrontal cortex is now finally fully developed. But in all seriousness, I have learned a lot in the last few years. Almost 4 years ago, I started building a business as a university student. And since the last Energy Disruptors event, we launched that business in Canada. For the last year and a half, we've been open in the market, and with that has come a lot of learning, some of which I'd like to share with you today. The business we launched in Canada is a crowdfunding platform. But when I speak to most folks in the country, crowdfunding instantly pops up GoFundMe, like a donation crowdfunding platform, or Kickstarter, like a rewards-based crowdfunding platform. Or it makes people think of funding potato salad projects. And for context, for those who don't know, a few years ago, there was a Kickstarter campaign where someone looked to raise $10 to make their own potato salad, and they ended up raising $55,000. So, well, we are quite a lot different than this, especially the potato salad. We use crowdfunding to finance sustainable development projects. Projects that contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and have measurable social and environmental impact. Very specifically, we use a crowdlending model. The concept is simply to gather a large number of people and businesses' small contributions, capital, into a single large contribution of capital. This capital is then used to finance a business or project that over time repays the investors plus interest, all through an online platform. And the outcome? Well, crowdlending can be used to target the underserved market of sustainable small business and social enterprise in Canada. Organizations that traditional banks aren't getting excited about financing because the opportunity is outweighed by their overhead. And what about the impacts? Well, what's so exciting about crowdlending is that every investor is picking and choosing between individual projects and businesses to invest in. Therefore, it's much easier to track the impact that every dollar is having, whether it's CO2 emissions avoided, jobs created, or people impacted. But this crowdlending thing, it's really not common in Canada, not very well known. But it's been making waves in other parts around the world for many years now. And in Europe, it's become commonplace, such as in the Netherlands. And we can look at an example of the Friesland Wind Park in the province of Friesland. The Friesland Wind Park is an 89-turbine wind farm generating 1.5 terawatt hours of energy per year. That's the consumption of about 1.2% of the entire country of the Netherlands, or the consumption of about 500,000 homes. It's a large project, to say the least. From the beginning of the project, the creators of the wind park wanted to prioritize community engagement. From the beginning of the project, they wanted the folks of Friesland to be able to participate financially, as well as be supported by the clean energy generation. So via a large Dutch crowdfunding platform, they offered the residents of the community the opportunity to invest in bonds with a 7.5% annual interest rate for a 5-year term from the power generation and sales of the wind park. Just in February earlier this year, they opened up the investment campaign, and in the first 24 hours, they had a whopping 6 million euros committed. And over the 6-week campaign, they raised over 27 million euros, marking Europe's largest ever crowdfunding campaign for renewable energy. And keep in mind, this was only available to residents of the small province of Friesland and no one else. Opening up the investment opportunity gave residents of the community a way to participate in their own sustainable transition while building wealth from renewables. I challenge you to imagine a world where you could invest in your own local energy project, providing safe, clean, efficient energy to your home while also earning a passive income. Sounds pretty great to me. Oops. And it's starting to sound pretty great to a growing number of Canadians, because for the last year and a half, we've started using this model in Canada. And there are a couple key learnings that I wanted to share with you from this first year and a half. The first being that we found there is a huge gap in funding for sustainable small businesses and social enterprises, specifically in small-scale financing. In our experience, this is in the sub-million to $1 million range. What we found is that most lenders aren't interested in these smaller projects. And the reason? Because it takes a similar amount of due diligence or work to look at projects regardless of the size. This means understanding the business model, the team, the market, the industry, the geography, why the financials look the way they do, and then verifying a lot of these details. So it can be quite time-consuming. So for larger financial institutions, it's much less interesting to be funding smaller projects when the return is smaller, yet it takes a similar amount of capacity as a larger project would. To be efficient, small business lending relies on quick, standardized indicators and financial metrics and application processes that don't always paint the whole picture of a business, and what many would say result in a one-size-fits-all product. And the outcome of this is that there's often high interest rates or declined funding applications for businesses that are quote-unquote innovative. But the interesting part is that these projects aren't necessarily higher risk. It just takes more capacity to de-risk them. And that's exactly what we do at Goparity. Being a digital technology platform, we have much lower overhead than traditional financial institution would. And it means we can commit more time and capacity to supporting these underserved projects. Projects that are often some of the most environmentally and socially impactful, such as last year working with an incredible organization called Barclay Project Group. Barclay Project Group are project managers specializing in renewable energy and community infrastructure for Indigenous communities. Their deep expertise across the clean energy value chain, long-term collaboration, and emphasis on capacity building and community ownership make them a trusted partner in community sustainable development and fostering resilience. They use this approach to work with communities across British Columbia, as well as the territories, such as developing and installing a 350 kilowatt hydropower facility with the Wakino First Nations. The Wakino First Nation is a community located up the coast of British Columbia, north of the tip of Vancouver Island, in a remote area only accessible by boat or float plane. Since the 1960s, they've been relying on a diesel power plant to provide energy to their community, costing upwards of $1 million per year. On top of the high cost, of course, the high amount of emissions, it also required barging in fuel through one of the most storied salmon-bearing watersheds on the coast. Well, thankfully, thanks to Barkley, they've now been able to displace 92% of their reliance on diesel by using the river to provide cleaner, safer, and more efficient power generation. Earlier this year, Barkley approached us for financing to support their growth, the growth of their operations, due to increasing demand from their clients. Their clients, being Indigenous communities, often have a longer development timeline than that of other commercial clients. And therefore, they needed financing that understood this unique difference. When they went to traditional lenders, they were met with steep interest rates that were better set up for shorter-term needs. So they came to us. We were able to understand their model and be flexible with terms. And when we introduced their model and their story to our crowd, we were quickly able to raise $300,000 through thousands of impact investors to support their ongoing success and impact. The second key learning we found is that people really do care. They want to make an impact with their money, supporting their community and supporting sustainability, just like the folks over in Friesland. And we can look across the country in Nova Scotia for a great example of this. This is Trevor and Michelle and their 2 kids of Silver Island Oysters. They've been running a small-scale oyster farm for the past 10 years after quitting their corporate jobs and moving out of the city. For a little bit of context, oysters have been named the unsung heroes of climate change by the World Wildlife Foundation for their incredible qualities in fighting against global warming. Oysters contribute to a healthier ocean through carbon sequestration in their shell structures and by filtering water, by filtering out phytoplankton and organic matter. Oysters are essential service providers to ocean ecosystems, providing food, clean water, air, and shelter. Oyster reefs provide natural barriers against coastal erosion and storm surges, mitigating disasters, pests, diseases, all while helping to regulate the climate. Need I say more? Wow. Thank you. Well, the environmental impacts of the oyster farm, as well as the social impacts of working with rural small business, really resonated with our community. And earlier this year, we raised $100,000 for Trevor and Michelle to add over 500,000 more oysters to their farm. And personally, my favorite story from this project was talking on the phone with one of the investors when they told me how excited they were to invest in the project, because for the past many summers, they've been spending cottage trips not too far from the farm, and they still remember learning how to chuck their first oyster by Trevor and Michelle's son. It gave their investment that much more meaning, knowing who and where it was going. It gave their investment a face. Now, I know this is quite small in the grand scheme of things, but what if it wasn't? What if we could fund larger projects together? Like a wind park providing power to hundreds of thousands of homes, like in Friesland. Like large-scale affordable housing developments providing housing for low-income families. Like transitioning thousands of acres of farmland to cheaper and more sustainable regenerative practices. What if we could meet the $5 trillion annual investment needed to meet the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goal agenda? Well, I see a world where we can, and I hope you can too. And now, beyond introducing you to this model, I wanted to take it one step further. One, I wanted to announce that we're officially launching in Alberta this month. And second, because of this, I wanted to give you all the opportunity to be an impact investor without investing $1 of your own money. By scanning the QR code here or going on to the event app, going to sponsors, typing in Goparity Canada, and finding us, you'll be able to use $50 to make your first impact investment on us, to really see it in action. Now, if nothing else, I hope you leave here today with a stronger belief in community and knowing that we can do incredible and daunting things when we work together, united. I mean, it's even in the name of the conference. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And just before I leave, sorry, one thing. I wasn't going to do this, but because of Yuval and saying how his least favorite advancement in technology was selfies, I think I need to take one now. Thank you all. Have a great day.